All right, well, let's be utterly clear. The elimination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah is a major coup for Israel. It should be celebrated by all who oppose terrorism and value freedom and democracy. This is one of the many reasons Israel also deserves the support of all Australians at its hour of need. Well, on Friday, yet again, Israel outwitted its enemies. The strategy behind the execution of Nasrallah showed sheer brilliance. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu signed off on the hit from his hotel room, as you can see in this picture. Moments later, he walked into the hostile halls of the United Nations to deliver a speech for the ages. It was the most important oration that fraudulent body, the UN, has heard since the war began. And as he delivered the speech, with his ominous warning for the Iranian-backed terror groups that Israel is winning, well, Nasrallah sat in his basement in Beirut, watching on. Unbeknownst to the terror leader, missiles shrieked across the sky and blasted the Hezbollah quarters where he was bunkered down, ending his 32-year reign of terror. Well, isn't it magnificent that Nasrallah's final moments on this earth were spent watching Netanyahu? The timing and execution of this precision attack was masterful. It was an act of ultimate strength in the face of terror. The moment the IDF confirmed Nasrallah's death on Saturday evening our time, it sparked celebrations among Jewish communities globally. In Israel, there was music and dancing, and one TV host did a l'chaim live on air when the news broke. And this is a moment for celebration, on par with the murder of Osama bin Laden. Only bin Laden has killed more Americans and more French than Hezbollah. Yet the New York Times reported today that American President Joe Biden had called Netanyahu and warned him that killing Nasrallah would set off a regional war. Biden reportedly asked him to hold fire. It's unbelievable. America's weakness is on full display, and it stands in contrast to what we're now witnessing on a daily basis: Israel's determination to survive. Netanyahu has shown that he's a leader for the times. Like former US President Ronald Reagan, the strategy guiding him is peace through strength, and we're seeing that in spades. The weak international community, capitulating to terrorism, demanded a ceasefire from Israel the moment it began to respond to the 8,000 Hezbollah rockets fired over the past year. But there was no demand for a ceasefire while Hezbollah was attacking Israel, only when Israel dared to respond, dared to defend its citizens. Well, Netanyahu ignores the feeble international community and its confusion. And instead, he took out all of Hezbollah's senior leadership with a series of attacks, each more genius than the last. He aims to remove the terror threat, not just for Israelis, but for all of us in the West. Peace through strength. There can be no other way in the wake of October 7 and the subsequent Hezbollah onslaught. And in his powerful United Nations address, Netanyahu spoke about how his objective is peace. It's a path he was on the way to achieving through the Saudi Arabia normalization deal before the Iranian-backed October 7 attacks changed everything. Netanyahu outlined how Hamas was now a diminished organisation. He said 23 of its 24 battalions have been destroyed and 90% of its rocket arsenal gone. But he says the job isn't finished, and he vowed that Hamas will not stay in power in Gaza.
And the reason is simple. Because if Hamas stays in power, it will regroup, rearm, and attack Israel again and again and again, as it is vowed to do. So Hamas has got to go. Just imagine. For those who say, well, Hamas has to stay, it has to be part of a post-war Gaza, imagine in a post-war situation in World War II, imagine allowing the defeated Nazis in 1945 to rebuild Germany. It's inconceivable, it's ridiculous. It didn't happen then, it's not going to happen now.
Brilliant. Netanyahu said Israel seeks a de-radicalized and demilitarized Gaza, but not one where Israel is in control. He said he's ready to work with partners to support a local civilian administration in Gaza that's committed to a peaceful coexistence. And as for calls for an immediate ceasefire, well, Netanyahu said this.
Ladies and gentlemen, this war can come to an end now. All that has to happen is for Hamas to surrender, lay down its arms, and release all the hostages. But if they don't, we will fight until we achieve victory, total victory. There is no substitute for it.
And the Israeli Prime Minister implored the world to stop appeasing Iran and stop its nuclear program. Now, I keep pointing out over and over again on this show how the United Nations, set up in the wake of World War II and the Holocaust, is now an enabler for terrorism. It protects those who deserve no protection. Well, Netanyahu made a similar point very well.
In this battle between good and evil, there must be no equivocation. When you stand with Israel, you stand for your own values and your own interests. Yes, we're defending ourselves, but we're also defending you against a common enemy that through violence and terror seeks to destroy our way of life. So there should be no confusion about this. But unfortunately, there is a lot of it in many countries and in this very hall, as I've just heard. Good is portrayed as evil, and evil is portrayed as good. We see this moral confusion when Israel is falsely accused of genocide, when we defend ourselves against enemies who try to commit genocide against us.
And look at those empty seats, by the way, and Penny Wong didn't bother to attend that address. I've got those exclusive details. I'm going to talk about them later in the show. I've got the response from the Foreign Minister's office. But what he says is right, and moral confusion is now a hallmark of the disgraced United Nations. And Netanyahu spoke about how there have been twice as many resolutions passed against Israel at the UN General Assembly in the past decade than the entire world combined. 174 condemnations of Israel compared with 73 against the rest of the world. These remarks that he made here were utterly brilliant.
The singling out of the one and only Jewish state continues to be a moral stain on the United Nations. It has made this once respected institution contemptible in the eyes of decent people everywhere. But for the Palestinians, this UN House of Darkness is home court. They know that in this swamp of anti-Semitic bile, there's an automatic majority willing to demonize the Jewish state on anything. In this anti-Israel flat earth society, any false charge, any outlandish allegation can muster a majority.
Anti-Israel flat earth society, he's exactly right, and it's a point I keep discussing over and over again. Now, Netanyahu ended his speech with this inspirational message.
But I have a message for you. Israel will win this battle. We'll win this battle because we don't have a choice. After generations in which our people were slaughtered, remorselessly butchered, and no one raised a finger in our defense, we now have a state. We now have a brave army, an army of incomparable courage, and we are defending ourselves. To borrow a great poet's phrase, Israel will not go gently into that good night. We will never need to rage against the dying of the light, because the torch of Israel will forever shine bright.
That is an important message that I urge the likes of Marine Faruqi and Penny Wong to listen closely to. And it's also a message that should give all of us courage as we face what often seems like an overwhelming barrage of hatred for Israel and anti-Semitism. And it's worse than hatred for Israel, it's an obsession for it not to exist. It's support for the terrorists who seek to destroy it and destroy Jews everywhere. But Israel will survive, it will prosper, in spite of the depravity of evil terror regimes and in spite of the best efforts of corrupt international bodies.